thanks for hanging with us today.
Good to be here. How are you?
Yeah, we are good.
No better way to spend Valentine's Day than with one of my favorite people.
So you could say that. I feel like I wouldn't get it. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you.
Oh, I guess I could
Thanks for
get
the
away.
gift.
Coach will kick off this segment with a little say what? Chiefs defensive tackle Chris Jones took down Tom Brady back in their Week 14 win over the Patriots. According to Jones, Brady was none too pleased. Say what?
That's the first time I ever seen Tom Brady get mad at a defensive lineman.
Earlier in the year?
Yeah.
Okay.
When I talked to him. But no, that's a part of the game, man. I feel like especially quarterbacks, because they just on a hiatus. You know, it's quarterback and D-line, those are two different type of class. So when y'all are able to clash up, you talk your you say how you feel to him. If you're on the ground, you know, you call him an old or get your old up, or you need to retire.
That's a good job by Chris Jones.
No, it is. I mean, Kansas City hasn't beaten New England that often, so that was his first opportunity, really.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? You're correct. And
now they're taking the victory lap, so they'll talk a lot more.
100%. It's great. Telling us in real time.
It is. It is.
I remember Richard Sherman famously talked some trash to Tom Brady. That's kind of how we got our introduction to Richard Sherman. Chris Jones kind of trying to reintroduce himself to the NFL. He's a pending free agent. I like it. Good job, Chris Jones.
Of course you like it.
Of course I like it.
Of course he likes it.
What do you think he does for 3 hours every morning? We're talking smack.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah, I try not to call people old. Certainly not those curse
I
words.
see what's happening now.
I wouldn't do that.
Somebody has a birthday coming up.
I do have a birthday coming up. We're all millennials on this set. I don't understand what the problem is. Time now for stories quickly to start your morning. We're moving on. Sponsored by Sprint Switch today. All right, so last night Jason Tatum went off 39 points in a double overtime win over the Clippers. Celtics have now won 8 of their last 9 games. Nick, how impressive was Jason Tatum?
Tatum was sensational. And I'm so excited for Boston and Boston fans. I got my annual tweet from Chris Mannix last night. Overexcited about the Celtics. Am I ready to?
Jaylen Brown didn't play.
Right. Am I ready to anoint them as finals contenders? Listen, I picked Milwaukee, but nothing will make me happier than if Boston can somehow make the NBA Finals, only to get swept out of there by LeBron. It would be so fitting and so perfect. But Tatum was great last night.
Yeah, arguably the best Celtic.
Oh, yeah. No, I would say inarguably.
Moving on to Zion now. Zion scored a career-high 32 points and became the youngest player to ever have 6 straight 20-point games. Nick, how impressive has Zion been?
Coach, it's been 10 games. I see Hall of Fame.
It's been 10 games. He's destined for greatness.
All right, here's what I can tell you.
I'm glad he's getting in shape. That's good.
And through 10 games, the only 2 human beings to ever put up his stat line, points and field goal percentage, Shaquille O'Neal and Michael Jordan. So I'm not saying he's Shaq or Michael Jordan, but he's only played 10 games. Through 10 games, those are the only 2 people to match what he's been able to do.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of runners through the first 15 minutes of the New York Marathon. Not some of the greatest runners in the history of the world, but
wait for it.
It is.
I'm not going to let you tear Zion down today, Coach.
There's no tearing down.
I'm not going to allow
Tee
it.
him up and he'll deliver.
I'm not going to allow it.
Just
All right.
jump on that bandwagon.
Let's talk some football. Last year, Big Ben Roethlisberger played just 2 games before an elbow injury ended his season. But even without Ben in the lineup, that Steelers team still finished 8-8. Steelers GM Kevin Colbert said he doesn't think Ben is, quote, at the end of the road like Eli Manning and Philip Rivers. Them fighting words. Nick, you think Ben can still play at a high level?
I think it's going to be very difficult. I can't write him off because it's not like we've seen him have the horrible year. Now, the last full year we saw him play, he led the league in interceptions, pardon me, but he still looked like he could make all the throws Ben could always make. And physically, he looked like the same guy that's almost impossible to bring down, that can extend plays, do all the things that I know you've talked about as a defensive coach going against him, how frustrating it can be because the play appears to be over and then the play is not only not over, but it's a huge gain for Pittsburgh. But history and odds obviously are stacked against him. The year I'm talking about was the 2018 season.
Right.
The 2019 season, he blows out his elbow. Right, exactly right. He blows out his elbow. And now we're talking about a guy who will be going into year 17 from a quarterback class that people are either gone or done. I mean, Eli's gone. Philip Rivers is going to be playing elsewhere because the Chargers don't want to bring him back. The Steelers, we had a bunch of older quarterbacks last offseason, Coach, that were pending free agents. Tom Brady, team wouldn't give him an extension. Drew Brees, team didn't give him an extension. Eli Manning obviously didn't get an extension. Phillip Rivers didn't get an extension. The fifth was Ben Roethlisberger. He got 2 years, $68 million. The Steelers are invested in him. And then after he got hurt, they said, we'll trade a first-round pick for this star safety, Minkah Fitzpatrick, because we're so confident we don't need to be in the quarterback market. And I don't think it's because they loved Mason or Duck so much. It's because they still trust Big Ben. So I am not going to say it is impossible Big Ben is good next year. What I am going to say is history is against him, and recent history of his class is against him. But because we haven't seen his play plummet yet, maybe we would have had he not gotten hurt.
Throw in age. Age is against him.
Oh, yeah, that's what I mean by history.
Okay.
I mean, a guy in year 17
sure.
at his age, all those are against him. But I haven't yet seen him fall off that cliff, so I can't write him off entirely.
Yeah, I think we're making the assumption that Phillip Rivers' issues were all Phillip Rivers' issues, and that nothing else came into play in the numbers that he had this year and the interceptions he had this year. But when you look at Big Ben, to me, it's about how well is he taking care of his body this offseason. And it looked like going into last year, he had made some adjustments physically. He had made some adjustments to the way that he trained. And that's a big part of it. That's a big part of being able to sustain yourself as your age increases. And it seems like his approach has improved. And that being said, I think he's such a huge jump from the two guys they have.
Well, that to me, I'm sorry to interrupt. The most important point, I think, might be they don't need him to be great. They need him to not be, with respect, Mason and Duck, right? Like, if they had league average quarterback play last year, given how great the defense was once Minkah got there, they'd have been a dangerous football team.
And it's just going to be interesting to see how he works with the young receivers, how that dynamic is, because we all were looking to see no Antonio, no Le'Veon, what's Ben going to be like, what's that chemistry going to be like when there's not a lot of drama happening, but we didn't get a chance to see that. I imagine that'll be good. Now, he's got to just make sure he doesn't force everything because he wants to make plays, because he wants to, you can get into so much trouble doing that. He's good enough doing the things that he's always done. He doesn't need to do everything and be everything to that offense in order for the team to be successful.
It's set up for him to be able to succeed next year in that Mike Tomlin works with him, has worked with him, knows what he can and cannot do. You're right. He just has to go in there, rely on that defense being as good as it was last year, not have to do too much or too little, be better than the two guys who tried to fill in at the position. And plus, this is the only uniform you could see this guy wearing. I can't see him in other colors. It's yellow and black.
They signed him to the extension. There's no question he's playing with the Steelers. The question
I mean, literally color scheme with his skin tone.
All of it. The question for Ben
it's a great skin
is going to be, can he cut down on the turnovers, though? Because if you are going to transition from a throw it around the yard, Antonio Brown, Juju Smith-Schuster, Le'Veon Bell is a great receiving running back offense, to a more, let's try to win games like we were trying to win games last year, trust our defense, not turn the ball over. I mean, Ben's turnovers, 20, 14, 16, 15, 15, 18. Those are the preceding 6 years to last year. So that's going to be an adjustment for him. The one other thing I would say that I would caution, and I'm not trying to be funny here, Ben is a guy who has never been known exactly as a fitness freak. And pictures can be misleading, but the pictures and the local reports out of Pittsburgh seem to be that this time away from football has not necessarily been forgiving for one Ben Roethlisberger. And so I do wonder, at his age, given his history of being a rounder-cheeked quarterback than we're used to seeing.
Is that what we're saying?
Yeah,
now?
I'll say that. That whether or not a year away from football, if he is going to be in the type of shape he's used to finding his way into by the beginning of a regular season.
Well, a couple things. Jenny, you made the point about relying on the defense and playing that role. I think Ben's going to have a real hard time doing that. He's not used to his name not being on the marquee.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the Pittsburgh Steelers starring Ben Roethlisberger, featuring everybody else, and that's how it's going to be. In terms of his weight, there's some players that play themselves back into shape. There's some players that have a timetable. Do I think that's necessarily the best way to do things? But it's just like exams. Some people cram and some people plan it out, and as you get older, I think you do need to plan it out a lot more.
And he's in uncharted waters for him. He's never missed this type of time. He's a guy who's been dinged a bunch in his career, but he plays basically since his rookie year at least 11 or 12 games, and most years 14 or 15 games every year. To be away for a full season, deal with a surgery where he has to learn how to do that because he's never had to deal with it.
But even Ben Roethlisberger, a little bit cherubic, is better than most guys.
Right.
Who are ripped up.
Fair enough.
If I may, Ben, intermittent fasting.